One thing Sophie Cunningham won't do is play along just for the sake of playing along.
The internet erupted the moment Sophie Cunningham openly admitted something most players would never dare say in public. After Michael Porter Jr. claimed that elite 8th grade boys could beat a WNBA team, fans expected the usual denial or outrage. Instead, Sophie shocked everyone by acknowledging that the talent gap is real and that people need to stop pretending otherwise.
Michael Porter Jr. last week came out, stated something fairly obvious. He said that top 8th graders would beat a WNBA team. Top 8th graders, not freshmen, not sophomore, not juniors, not seniors. Top 8th grade boys beating a WNBA team. Michael Porter Jr. took a lot of heat for that statement. And Sophie Cunningham was asked to speak on this clip.
Her honesty set off a storm across social media and inside the league. Some praised her for speaking truth. Others attacked her for breaking the code of silence. What happened next turned a simple comment into one of the most heated debates in women's basketball.
We have Angel McCordry talking about the clip, going after Michael Porter Jr., saying some questionable things and some things I'm going to poke some holes in. And of course, Sophie Cunningham taking heat from the old guard for saying what's true.
Sophie Cunningham never planned to be at the center of this debate. But the moment Michael Porter Jr.'s comments resurfaced, everything shifted toward her. It started quietly at first, with a few messages and tags, but within hours, her phone filled with more than 30 notifications from people sending her the same clip and asking for her reaction. She was in the middle of a workout when she finally checked it, expecting it to be an old conversation floating around again. Instead, she saw that the clip had gone viral all over social media and the timeline was exploding with anger, confusion, and heated arguments.
Well, so I will just tell you, I was working out. And when did this tweet, can you scroll down? When did this tweet come out yesterday? I guess this started kind of hitting social media platforms, but I'm not kidding. I think maybe 35 people sent me this tweet yesterday. And yeah. I was like, what? But he said this kind of I feel like a year or at least 4 or 5 months ago, something kind of regarding the same topic. So I thought it was just kind of resurfacing.
Mm-hmm.
But then I saw it and I was like, people are kind of going in on him because it doesn't the timeline doesn't make so much sense.
Michael Porter Jr. made a simple claim when asked what age elite boys could beat WNBA players. He said 8th grade, which he had experienced personally back when he matched up with high-level girls while still in middle school. Instead of addressing the claim itself, critics immediately attacked the timeline, questioning whether he and Sophie were actually in the same age range or whether the story lined up perfectly. That became the distraction.
Well, from what I gathered, he basically was trying to say no one should compare NBA and WNBA players together because he could beat you guys in basketball in one-on-one when he was in 8th grade and you guys were in high school.
I think, and this is my personal opinion, but if you are a professional football player, basketball player, really any sport, but let's just take it basketball because that's where we're both at. To me, if you're in that elite level group, yeah, you should be able to beat the girls. I'm not surprised by that. That is not, I just don't get why it's continuing to get brought up. And if women are saying that he couldn't beat them, yeah, he could.
People debated dates and school years instead of the actual issue he raised. It was easier for them to fight the calendar than to confront the uncomfortable comparison. Sophie quickly realized that the timeline arguments were only a shield. Nobody wanted to touch the real conversation. They did not want to admit that elite male athletes, even at a young age, have physical advantages that translate into dominance on the court. They wanted to avoid the obvious truth.
And that's why it gets brought up, Sophie Cunningham, because a lot of ladies do say that they can beat the men. That's why it gets brought up to a certain extent. A lot of people do say that these WNBA players can beat a D1 college kid, can beat a high-level elite high school kid. A lot of fans in the WNBA say this, think this, believe this, will die on a hill professing this. That's why it gets brought up.
So instead of arguing about when Michael was in 8th grade, Sophie focused directly on what he said. She acknowledged that elite male players should be able to beat women. She even said she was not surprised by it and did not see why the topic kept resurfacing when the answer has always been obvious to anyone who respects both sports. But Sophie's honesty triggered a new wave of backlash. Fans who refused to accept reality shifted their frustration. They were not ready to hear a current WNBA player say the quiet part out loud. And the pressure around her comments only continued to build.
Do you think an 8th grader could hang? A group of elite 8th graders could beat a WNBA team?
Drumroll, please.
I mean, if they're future pros, dude, I mean, it just depends how big they are at that age. Like,
yeah.
And the majority of the time, if they're going pro, unless you're a late bloomer, like you're already pretty big. And like, I mean,
they're massive 8th grade boys.
Yeah. So I would say that's like probably
honestly
true.
Fuck, I don't want
I mean, it's probably true. Like I don't want to be unrealistic or delusional. Like,
thank you.
Men are just stronger, bigger, athletic. Like they just are a different build. And so if you put them up against females, I'm like,
she literally said, I don't want to be unrealistic or delusional. God damn.
The moment Sophie stepped into the conversation with honesty rather than defensiveness, the entire tone of the debate changed. Instead of dodging the question or trying to reshape it into something more flattering for the league, she addressed the core of it directly. Michael Porter Jr. was not talking about random middle schoolers. He was referring to elite 8th grade boys who were already on a trajectory toward becoming college prospects or future pros. These are kids who are often 6 feet tall, explosive, and training at levels far beyond what most people imagine. When Sophie acknowledged this reality, she did something most WNBA players avoid. She removed emotion and spoke from a place of experience. She explained that any elite athlete, regardless of gender, should expect to dominate a less physically developed group. It was not disrespect. It was simple logic. And she made it clear that comparing NBA and WNBA athletes directly is pointless because the physical gap is undeniable. Her tone was calm, collected, and grounded in common sense. There was no attempt to sugarcoat the truth. She even admitted that she did not understand why the topic kept resurfacing as if the outcome would magically change. But the backlash came fast, because Sophie, unintentionally, exposed a deeper tension within WNBA culture. For years, some fans pushed the narrative that WNBA players could beat Division I men, elite high school boys, or even challenge NBA players one-on-one. These claims grew louder on social media as people tried to elevate women's basketball through comparisons that had no basis in reality. Instead of promoting the women's game on its own strengths, they created an illusion that collapsed as soon as someone told the truth. Sophie's honesty threatened that illusion. When she agreed with Michael Porter Jr. in a straightforward, matter-of-fact way, it shattered the protective bubble some fans built around the league. The reaction was not about her comment being wrong. It was about her comment being right. And once a current player broke the silence, critics scrambled to redirect the conversation. They tried to dismiss the question. They tried to attack the context. They tried everything except addressing the truth she laid out. As Sophie's comments spread, the backlash from the old guard of the WNBA community grew louder and sharper. These were the same voices that usually push a strict narrative about women's basketball, one that relies heavily on insisting that the talent gap between men and women is far smaller than it actually is. The moment Sophie refused to play along, they turned on her. Instead of engaging with her reasoning, many attacked her character. They accused her of being a pick-me, of pandering to male fans, and of weakening the league by acknowledging something they believed should never be said out loud. The criticism had nothing to do with basketball and everything to do with protecting an image. This group often reacts emotionally to any comparison between women and men in sports. They insist that WNBA players could beat elite high school boys or that NBA players exaggerate their physical edge. Sophie's willingness to speak honestly struck at the heart of that belief system. She exposed the cracks in their logic without even trying. The old guard did not want a conversation about skill, athleticism, or development. They wanted unity, even if it meant repeating something unrealistic. Sophie's candor made that impossible. What made the situation even more volatile was that Sophie did not attack anyone. She did not mock her own league. She did not disrespect women's basketball. She simply spoke from experience. Yet the reaction she received was far harsher than anything directed toward Michael Porter Jr. That alone showed the deeper problem. These critics were not angry about the comparison. They were angry that a current WNBA player validated it. It felt like betrayal to them. The more they attacked her, the more people outside the WNBA bubble stepped in to defend her. Fans, analysts, and players from other levels echoed what she said, pointing out the obvious physical reality that elite boys grow faster, jump higher, move quicker, and develop strength earlier. But this only made the old guard angrier. They doubled down, claiming that anyone agreeing with Sophie was either biased or ignorant. By the end of the day, it was clear the backlash wasn't really about Sophie's words. It was about control. The old guard wanted to dictate the narrative, and Sophie refused to follow the script. The debate reached a new level of intensity the moment Angel McCordry stepped into the conversation. As one of the more vocal veterans associated with the old guard, she delivered a response filled with emotion, frustration, and a deep insistence that men should never compare themselves to women in sports. Angel framed Michael Porter Jr.'s comments as an obsession, questioning why he talked about women so often and implying he was insecure. Her argument quickly shifted away from basketball itself and into personal struggles that women experience. She mentioned playing through painful periods, dealing with pregnancies, taking care of families, and balancing the responsibilities of being both athletes and mothers. These are real challenges, and no one denies that women endure things men do not. But the way Angel used these points to reject a basketball comparison created confusion. She talked about headaches, load management, and emotional support rather than the athletic question at hand. Instead of addressing whether elite 8th grade boys could beat WNBA players, she reframed the issue into a moral lecture about respecting women. The argument sounded strong emotionally, but it fell apart logically because it never actually answered the question. Angel also suggested that NBA stars like Kobe Bryant and LeBron James never made these kinds of comparisons. But that point failed too, because those players never needed to comment on something so obvious. Professional male athletes do not spend time debating whether they could beat women. Everyone knows the answer. It only becomes a conversation when fans push unrealistic narratives, or when a player like Michael Porter Jr. gets asked directly. Angel's criticism misrepresented why the topic resurfaced in the first place. Her emotional tone created a divide online. Some praised her for standing up for women. Others felt she avoided the truth and tried to guilt people into protecting a narrative rather than acknowledging reality. And while her intentions may have been to uplift the WNBA, her response unintentionally highlighted the very insecurity she accused others of having. But what made Angel's comments even more controversial was that they opened the door for critics to compare her words to the actual behavior of WNBA players, which became a problem she never expected. Angel's argument began to unravel the moment people started. Comparing her claims to what actually happens in the WNBA, she emphasized that women play through unimaginable pain, carry heavy emotional loads, and compete at the highest level, even when dealing with physical challenges most men never experience. But the reality fans pointed out online told a different story. This season alone featured several high-profile WNBA players taking extended breaks, load managing or sitting out for non-serious issues. The image of endless toughness that Angel tried to present clashed with the visible behavior of the league. One of the first examples critics mentioned was Satou Sabally taking time off during the season. Fans remembered this clearly and pointed it out immediately. Others highlighted the stretch where Angel Reese appeared disengaged during games and later sat out the final matchups of the season. These were not isolated cases. They represented a pattern that made Angel's claim that WNBA players never load manage impossible to defend. In fact, the league plays fewer games, has longer rest periods, and still sees players sitting out more often than Angel suggested. Angel's statement about NBA players load managing for headaches also failed to connect with reality. Many NBA players endure intense schedules, back-to-back games, cross-country travel, and far more physical punishment. The load management issue in the NBA is tied to long-term health and the 82-game season, not headaches or minor discomfort. Her comparison came off as exaggerated, and fans wasted no time pointing it out. What really hurt her argument, however, was how quickly people contrasted her emotional claims with the straightforward truth Sophie shared. Sophie never argued about pain tolerance or responsibilities. She discussed physical ability and athletic development. Angel shifted the conversation toward sympathy, while Sophie focused on reality. This difference made Angel appear defensive, as if she needed to rely on unrelated hardships to avoid answering the core question about athletic performance. As critics continued to dismantle Angel's points, the conversation took another turn. The debate moved from skill and strength into something even more polarizing. Whether WNBA players and fans were intentionally avoiding the truth about the talent gap, that topic created a firestorm all on its own. Once the debate shifted from athletic reality to emotional defensiveness, the reaction online became even more volatile. Sophie Cunningham suddenly found herself targeted not only by former players, but by an entire wave of WNBA fans who were determined to shut down her honesty. Instead of debating the physical differences she discussed, many attacked her personality. They claimed she was seeking male approval. They called her a pick-me. They argued that she was harming women's basketball by refusing to protect the image they wanted the league to project. None of these reactions focused on basketball itself. They were attempts to pressure Sophie into silence. This backlash was driven by a very specific group within the fanbase, the ones who treat criticism of the WNBA as betrayal. They saw Sophie's comments as crossing a line. In their view, a current player is supposed to defend the league at all costs, regardless of whether the argument is factual. For years, these fans built an online bubble where they repeated the idea that WNBA players could beat male college athletes, elite boys teams, or even challenge NBA players one-on-one. They convinced each other these claims were empowering. So when Sophie acknowledged the reality that elite boys are physically stronger and more explosive, it destroyed the narrative they depended on. Instead of adjusting their views, they attacked her for breaking the illusion. Some even took the argument into absurd territory, accusing Sophie of undermining women's accomplishments simply by acknowledging biological truth. Others insisted that Michael Porter Jr.'s comments were rooted in insecurity instead of athletic fact. They didn't want logic. They wanted emotional validation. What made the backlash worse was how quickly it escalated. Fans began twisting Sophie's words, claiming she said things she never said. They tried to paint her as anti-women, even though she plays at the highest level of the women's game. They ignored her accomplishments, her competitiveness, and her commitment to her team, all because she refused to lie to make them feel better. But as the criticism grew, something else began to happen. People outside the WNBA bubble started stepping in, calling out the delusion and defending Sophie for simply telling the truth. And that shift completely changed the direction of the conversation. The moment outside voices joined the discussion, the tone of the entire debate shifted. Fans, analysts, former college players, and even coaches began stepping in to defend Sophie. They argued that she wasn't diminishing women's basketball at all. She was simply refusing to pretend that biology doesn't matter in sports. Her honesty became a rallying point for people who were tired of the unrealistic comparisons that constantly surface online. Many pointed out that acknowledging physical differences does not devalue women athletes. It only recognizes the reality of how athletic development works. Yet this logic only made the most defensive fans angrier. Some critics doubled down, claiming Sophie's comments would hurt the league by giving ammunition to people who mock women's basketball. Others insisted that she was undermining her own accomplishments, even though acknowledging male athletic advantages has nothing to do with disrespecting female athletes. The most extreme voices accused her of damaging the progress women have made in the sport. They wanted her to repeat the narrative they created, not the truth she experienced firsthand. What they feared most was that her honesty would expose how fragile their arguments had always been. Comments across social media became more intense. Some users insisted that elite male athletes couldn't possibly lose to WNBA teams, no matter how talented the women were. Others said they would bet everything they owned on top 8th grade boys defeating a WNBA roster. People familiar with AAU circuits chimed in, describing how explosive, tall, and physically dominant elite boys can be at that age. These weren't casual opinions. They were observations from people who coach or compete at high levels. Their testimony further supported what Sophie said. What sparked the most emotion, however, was the accusation that Sophie and other players only speak honestly to protect male fans or gain approval from them. These claims ignored the fact that Sophie was simply answering a basketball question. Her critics were so committed to a narrative of women outperforming men that they treated her truthfulness as betrayal. But the debate was about to take an even sharper turn. As more fans weighed in, the conversation expanded beyond Sophie and Michael Porter Jr. It began to collide with another ongoing tension in the WNBA. The role of Caitlin Clark and how her presence has disrupted every part of the league's culture. As the argument grew larger and louder, the debate started drifting into territory that had nothing to do with Sophie, Michael Porter Jr., or even the boys versus women comparison. It collided directly with the tension that has been simmering in the WNBA ever since Caitlin Clark entered the league. Suddenly, Sophie's honesty wasn't just about basketball. It became part of a much bigger cultural divide that has split the fan base into two fierce camps. The moment people mentioned Missouri, honesty, or realism, some fans immediately dragged Caitlin Clark into the discussion, claiming that Sophie's comments were somehow connected to the controversies surrounding her. It didn't matter that Caitlin had nothing to do with the conversation, they forced her into it anyway. Some critics went as far as saying Sophie's remarks were proof of an underlying bias within the league, accusing her of feeding narratives that favor Caitlin Clark's fanbase. Others argued that the fans defending Sophie were the same ones who defend Caitlin and dismiss veteran players. These claims had no connection to the original topic, but they spread quickly because the WNBA is already fueling an internal culture war. Anything that challenges the old guard ends up being lumped together as part of the Caitlin Clark effect. There were even arguments that Sophie's realism gave ammunition to people who already criticized the WNBA for its physical limitations compared to men's basketball. Some fans seemed more concerned about controlling public perception than addressing the actual question. They wanted unity at any cost, even if it meant demanding that players avoid telling the truth about simple athletic differences. Sophie's willingness to say out loud what players privately acknowledge made her an instant target for people who already feel threatened by the changing direction of the league. Meanwhile, the other side defended Sophie strongly. They argued that she was exactly the type of player the league needs right now. Someone honest, someone grounded, someone who speaks clearly without sugarcoating obvious truths. In their eyes, Sophie's comments weren't controversial. They were refreshing. They believed the backlash proved how insecure and fragile the old guard's narrative had become by the time the conversation reached its peak. It was clear this was no longer about 8th grade boys or Michael Porter Jr. It was about the WNBA's struggle between truth and delusion, between realism and image control, and between players who speak freely and those who demand silence. The entire debate showed just how divided the league's culture truly is. Sophie Cunningham never intended to start a firestorm, but her honesty forced the WNBA community to confront a truth many tried to avoid. A simple admission about athletic differences exposed deeper issues within the league, from unrealistic expectations to internal divides shaped by loyalty, insecurity, and shifting fan dynamics. Her comments revealed who valued reality and who preferred comfortable illusions. And as the debate spread far beyond her words, it became clear that this conversation was never just about 8th grade boys. It was a reflection of the WNBA's ongoing struggle between authenticity and image, a struggle that is only getting louder.